All right. One of these works.
Settle in.
It's the sound of victory.
Smell of victory.
Yeah, thanks for the hike, man.
Yeah?
That was a really cool spot. And great conversation as well.
Absolutely.
See if we can track back anything worthwhile into the airwaves.
Yeah,
the podcast
we
space.
certainly covered a lot of ground, both in our hike and in our conversation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what were some of the more interesting threads you want to pull on?
Well, the main reason that I drove up to Fort Collins and wanted to meet you in person is because you've got I don't know, I felt like some level of connection. I connected to your authenticity based on a few of the videos that I saw you, that you'd released on YouTube, which just struck me as not standardized sort of YouTuber jargon.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I found out about your channel because my buddy Simon, we're both kind of, I mean, he's more into the space than me, but we're both like Web3 fans, and he's like, you should check out this guy from Uncomplication. He sent me your channel. He's like, he'd be an interesting person to meet, and it was interesting because like I saw all the videos that I saw had really nothing to do with crypto, other than kind of like you talking about crypto from a different sort of perspective than within crypto, and like the technical analysis side of things, and like when you're in the hype of the bull run or the bear cycle or whatever, the whole collective sort of mob crypto mentality that kind of happens. So maybe we can start there, pick it up where it's like, what was Uncomplication? What did it turn into, and what is it now?
Yeah, that's a great opening for a storytelling moment. So crypto.
You're Ryan, by the way.
Oh, I'm Ryan. Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah, so I, like many people, came into crypto because it was taking off. And I had seen that happen a couple times before, although had not participated in past market cycles. But I knew that this was something that crypto did, and I actually had time and space to go into it this time around. So I said, all right, I'm going to learn crypto. I'm going to become a trader. I'm going to really double down and learn this craft because I had just left my employment for the last 10 years. I just left that company. And so this was like, all right, I'm going to make money just by understanding how this market works. And it's funny, you can become an expert in crypto in about a month if you really, buckle down. And that's not to say that experience isn't super valuable and there aren't people out there with a lot of experience, but you can go on YouTube and present yourself as a crypto expert after about a month. Like, you can learn the basic TA, you can convince yourself that you understand the market pretty quickly. And I think that's where I was. I'm naturally very interested in things, and I'm a fast learner, so before I knew it, I was counseling and sharing information with a whole bunch of people in my life, getting them all into crypto. And I wasn't posting on YouTube. I was not a crypto YouTuber. I was just talking to friends and family. And then when the market started changing direction violently, and all of my friends who a month before were just seeing dollar signs and talking about what cool car they were going to buy or whatever, everyone was suddenly in panic mode. I was like, there's something more going on here. Mm-hmm. Like, if this is what everyone thinks it is, this is this super scarce digital gold, like all the narratives that we had kind of been drinking in, it was really clear that there was some psychology at play behind the market that was more than what we were getting at face value. So at a certain point, I became aware of Richard Wyckoff, who was a man who lived in the early 1900s and who studied the way the stock market worked, even back in the days before digital trading or any of that stuff was going on. He understood how the stock market was manipulated to take money from unsavvy investors. And a lot of the same patterns and psychologies that he was describing back in the 1900s were right in front of us in crypto. So I recorded a video that really spelled out how a market moves, how it is designed to take money from people that are misinformed or being fed this narrative of, it's a bull run, it's going to the moon, we're going to be at 200K by this date. And so I posted a video that kind of broke down how the market actually works. And I sent that to other YouTubers, other people in the space that I respected. Nobody got back to me. Nobody wanted to hear it. It was just crickets because everyone was in the bull run fever. And then when the market finally did turn around and crash by, I think it was like 50 or 60% in March of 2020, or April of 2020, or 2021, last year.
So it wasn't the COVID crash, it was a separate...
Yeah, 2021. All of a sudden, for whatever reason, the video that I posted had kind of been discovered, and it was being shared by other YouTubers and on Yahoo Finance and all these places. So my little philosophical podcasting channel that maybe had a few dozen subscribers suddenly had 160,000 subscribers in a couple of weeks because everyone was coming for that content. And if you're interested in crypto and you actually want to glean a little bit more about how the market is manipulated to take money from unsavvy investors, you can go back and you can watch all of those videos from that period of time. But like I said, I only got into crypto fairly recently, and it was hard to go from warning people about the dangers of this and seeing the stories of people that have been hurt by this market manipulation, and then to be sort of typecast as like a crypto YouTuber, which I'm not. And I said I wasn't from day one. So now I've been kind of navigating this really interesting space where I'm doing everything wrong when it comes to YouTube. Like I'm turning down all the money, all the sponsorships, all the things that you're supposed to do to have a successful channel, because I don't know, my true north is something very different than what the world, what people wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've been kind of navigating that transition from having all of these people come in for a very specific topic, which is fun to talk about. It opens up the door to like, what do you value, like as a person? You work for money. Why do you work for money? How much money do you need? Like crypto is a really interesting doorway into these questions with people, but my interest is a lot more with people than it is just with crypto in the market. There's a million channels out there that will just every day post 3 videos talking about crypto. I'm a lot more interested in the deeper human philosophical conversations.
Which is the reason that I'm here. So I think you got a cool channel for that very reason. And it is weird, man. It's a strange phenomenon when you see kind of like the madness of crowds playing out. You see it like it's fever. It really is. And I was part of the 2017 run up. That's when I got in, and a lot of people got in right in that December 2017 sort of like spike to 20K Bitcoin and stuff. And it was like this weird sort of optimism that is just sort of kind of gets absorbed through osmosis by the space that you're part of or that you're tuned into. And then when it crashed and everybody was like, it was a scam, everything's fucked, it's all, it's going to zero or whatever. That's when I actually, for whatever reason, me getting into crypto, I can't tell you exactly what it was, what particular event or thing I read or person or whatever. Actually, it might have been like, what's his name? The Greek dude, the Antonopoulos guy. I don't know if you know. Yeah, he was on Joe Rogan, and he kind of gave me a glimpse into like, he's basically, his opinion was like, I could give a shit less about the price. And he wanted to talk about like why this was a meaningful revolution in technology, and it got me kind of like curious. And so after the bear cycle and throughout the bear cycle, I actually got deeper into the crypto space. But it was very much motivated by like, I'm going to make money, you know what I mean, and I'm going to figure out how to trade or how to play the market or whatever. And I think that's kind of like most people's entry point into crypto. It's like they're seeing it as a financial opportunity or some sort of an investment strategy or something. So it didn't take me more than, I don't know, 6 months to a year or so of playing that game before I realized that it wasn't worth, even if I could be good at it and I was successful, it wasn't worth the trade-off for me, which was mental health, sanity, losing yourself in a trading view kind of
Yeah.
watch list, you know what I mean, where you're just you're constantly checking it on a market and seeing what's going on. And it's funny because shout out to Simon because he's probably going to check this one out. I went to visit him in Colombia, and I hadn't seen him for a while, and you know, I saw so vividly what happens when you are just in that space, like dialed in, like way dialed in. Because he was for a while, like he was dialed into it, and he was making money, and it was like, it was basically he didn't have a job, so it was like his livelihood, so he's treating it like a job, which I understand. But it's hard to even have a few moments where it's like there's no phone, there's no market kind of existing or coexisting in the same space. So it's this weird space to kind of try to navigate. And on the one hand, you get excited about the optimism, and not just to make money, but for the real kind of implications of what like blockchain and decentralized distributed ledger technology can do. And then on the other hand, it's like you're watching more or less people's lives kind of fall apart, and you're seeing like kind of, you can see, I'm not saying that's the case with Simon, but like, you were talking earlier today about people reaching out who had lost a lot of money and kind of seeking some sort of someone to talk to about it. And there's a lot of people out there who have been really burned by this space, and I've seen people like taking loans out and then just lose everything. So it's a strange phenomena. And when I say this space, I'm not talking about our space, because I don't think, like, I'm not a crypto podcaster, you're not a crypto YouTuber, but the kind of landscape that exists right now in that space specifically is very strange. And I guess, how do you segue from in life, like from being in that space, right, and realizing what it is, like, and we can talk more about that, like what you've realized, is going on and the phenomena playing out, and then like where do you try to go to next,
Well, so pulling on a few threads that you just brought to the surface, if I really step back and look at crypto and then see it as a petri dish for human behavior in and of itself, what does crypto provide for a lot of people? And for a lot of people, it's hope. And because it's new technology, because it's early, there's the feeling that we can overthrow these old systems. I've done a lot of research just in like what is today's economic environment, and a lot of people are not ready for retirement. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people are already squeezed financially. So crypto kind of rises on the horizon as this opportunity that if you're just there early enough, if you're just smart enough, if you're listening to the right people, you'll be able to escape this, inflationary, failing financial landscape that we're in. And so I think that there's, in itself, crypto is this potential that humans can overcome challenges, they can adapt, Web3 having all of these new magical properties that we can reconstruct the framework of, trustless value exchange across the planet. Like there's a ethos there that is really enticing. The challenge is you put that on the horizon for people, this hope, this escape, and then what people are actually met with is a highly refined casino that is driven by fear and greed that is super good at separating people from their money. Because you get on YouTube, the algorithms are promoting the people that are shouting the loudest with the most hopium, the most, this is going to the moon. If you're not buying these 100x altcoins, you're going to miss the boat, yada, yada. So like you were talking about, you can get really absorbed in this space for the best intentions. But if you don't understand that this market is now maturing to do what markets have always traditionally done, which is the big, hedge funds and the investment banks and the large interests are really good at playing this game where they acquire, a big amount of a stock or a crypto, and then they drive that marketing machine through news cycles, through YouTubers, through Twitter, through all of these other ways that get people to buy in at the worst possible time before they sell it to them and then drive the whole thing back down in fear and panic so they can acquire it again and, do the same cycle again. That's the part that I think, at first was really upsetting to me because I came in with that optimism that this was technology that was going to help us, solve these big world challenges, which it still might, but you have to see through that layer of marketing, and there's so many projects out there. Most of them they're not worth
Not
the
even
time
your
and the attention.
yeah.
And there's also just tons of scams. There's so many ways that you can lose money in crypto, and there's only a few ways that you can actually make money in crypto. And like I said, the segue for me is then great. All of these humans around the planet, different countries, ages, sexes, races, nationalities, like everyone is coming to this space with this hope for a better future. Well, that's a perfect petri dish for bigger conversations about, like I said, who are we? What are we doing? What do we really need? How is our fear and greed being used against us in a lot of ways to drive consumerism or compulsive gambling or compulsive, crypto trading? And so my interest has been, okay, all of these people are here, but what's the deeper conversation that we can be having? And that's where it has been a challenge. People I know come to my channel because they think I'm super smart, and I'm going to tell them some secret that's going to let them, have a successful trade. And really what I'm saying is I'm not that guy. I'm really just here to ask some bigger questions.
Right.
And if there's anything that I'm bringing to an audience, it's just an ongoing story of my own growth and discovery that had this moment in crypto, but is also tied in with my family and my relationships and, my hopes and dreams and my, successes and failures. And that's where I think the conversation actually opens up into something more interesting than just how are you going to 10x your money and go drive a Lamborghini to the moon?
Yeah.
That is the surest way to actually lose all your money. And it's not a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you are one of the few lucky ones or whatever it is, like the small 0.001% or whatever that either got in super early on something that did blow up, or you got lucky or whatever, it's just the same. It's gambling. So if most of the people who do, I think, get that sort of payday, I guess, you probably don't end up keeping all of it, right? Because it's a gambling problem.
So this is great. So I've been substitute teaching in this economics class at the high school level, and they're all into stock trading, and they're doing the stock simulator, and they're all like, stonks, talk about stonks. And I told them, if you're using the word stonks, you go and lose your money. That is the whole... it's like a meme-driven fever around getting rich quick, and the thought that, we're just going to get together on a Reddit board and pump and dump some stock. It's really appealing, but it's, even for young people, I feel like there's an educational moment to step back and see how a market actually moves and actually talk about investment strategies that work versus this gimmicky conception that we're all just going to go download Coinbase. And then the one that kills me is the crypto.com commercials. Crypto.com now, they're sponsoring the Super Bowl. They own the stadium. It's a huge industry. They're making that money from somewhere, and it's just like a casino. Yeah. The casino's not there because they're paying a bunch of people.
Right. Crypto.com
isn't buying stadiums or sponsoring stadiums because they're, making everybody millionaires. But there's ways that you can engage in this space and invest over a long time, or actually be disciplined as a trader and be making small percentage moves, small percentage gains on small moves. I think the stat is, or the thing that I've heard in the stock market at least, and I'm sure this is true in crypto too, is 90-90-90. 90% of people will lose 90% of their money within 90 days when they try and start becoming a day trader. So,
it's pretty much gambling. How about for a second, if you decouple investing and trying to make money from Web3 for a second, we just talk about the space in that regard, because you're right, people are coming into it with hope, but not just people who are hoping to get rich quick, developers who are hoping to build something pioneering and revolutionary, people who are trying to actually take this down from the ethereal abstract realm of like the world's just going to be better with this technology to like how and like how we're going to do it and try to make something out of it. And something that I've been kind of obsessed with lately is sovereignty, and we've been talking about that today. But to me, I see blockchain as hopefully and blockchain's kind of just like a loose, amalgamation of all of this, but like I see it as hopefully a catalyst to upregulate sovereignty in the sense that like you have who controls the money controls the power, right? And I'm not saying that it's everyone who's trying to play the crypto game is sovereign right now. Obviously, there's a ton of people who are getting hijacked by algorithms and by whatever forces you want to call it that are driving this behavior that's leading to 90% of people losing 90% or whatever. So like those factors are playing out right now, but I still think that there could be something that emerges from this that just leads to hopefully self-organizing kind of bottom-up power distribution, potentially a new way for human beings to cohere and govern themselves and organize, like self-organizing sort of networked tribes, as Jim Rutt would say, right? Like, so it's like that's hopefully like a bright spot that's trying to emerge from all of this, right? And obviously there's going to be a bunch of noise in the system and all this like stuff along the way. But when I think of crypto, I'm not thinking about charts anymore. Like I'm not thinking about, trying to make a swing trade or something. I'm thinking about like, what are all the experiments in DAOs going to mean for the future? Like all the new, completely bottom up, like decentralized, self-governing, I guess, organizations that have collective treasuries and collective choice making and whatever. Like they're pioneering that, and they're trying to figure out how does this work, right? Especially in an environment where like we don't necessarily even know each other, right? So it's kind of has to be trustless. So it's really I think kind of a pioneer or a frontier rather in some fundamental sense. Like I think of this as so important because this problem I think of as like the meta problem, where if we can solve the hard problem of like, maybe back up for a minute. Like, so if you think of coherence and how do human beings cohere? We found coherence on the Dunbar level of 150 or so individuals in the hunter-gatherer society, right? That was sort of how we were cohering. And, that system worked pretty well. Like it worked for, I don't know, a couple 100,000 years or something. I don't know, like a long time where we were able to kind of flourish and thrive as tribes, even though that involved like a lot of, wars with other tribes and different things that aren't necessarily optimal. But that was kind of our coherence was at the level of like a colony, like an ant colony has coherence, right? And then we shift to this like societal game of globalization. I mean, eventually, and in industry and agriculture and all these things that have led to where we're at now. And I feel like we're trying to find that story, that collective coherence, and where's the level of coherence residing now? Because we all kind of feel the alienation of not having the tribe, of not having the fire to sit around with your tribe, and the protection that you feel with people you can intimately, like deeply trust, and also interrelying and interdepending on other people. Like that's just kind of how we're evolutionary wired, with these like chemical reward systems to feel good when those types of things are happening, right? Just like it feels good to even just sit down and have a conversation with another person, right? So how do you bring that back into the mix, or at least provide some level of human flourishing where we are, we have those needs met, including the belonging and the community, but you also still have globalization, because you're not putting that one back in the bag, so to speak. Like we're not going back to sticks and stones. And so I think blockchain might have something to do with that transition, and trying to figure out what that looks like moving forward.
Yeah. And it's funny. I think that one of the themes of our discussions throughout the day is centered around this notion that we have an uncertain future in front of us, but it's also a blank slate to try some new experiments in how people are arranging themselves. You were talking about these little communities that are self-sufficient and self-contained and getting back to a little bit of that tribal feeling, where you do have cohesiveness. And I definitely see these technologies as a natural expression of what humans have been tinkering with now for the last 150 years, that's providing an entirely new set of building blocks to start solving some of these problems. Mm-hmm. Now, where I think we might have a little bit difference of opinion or just perspective is that I don't think that these exist in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a blank slate. I think it's actually a very complex system, a very complex organism that these building blocks are kind of maturing out of, and that the future is not so much just a build your own adventure using these tools to like create these new and better societies. I think that we are in the midst of some pretty big changes from one state of being, one state of structures that have supported humanity up to this point and are now shifting to give way to this new future. But that blockchain in and of itself is not going to overthrow the world's governments or the 1% of the wealth controlling or the 1% of the population that controls 90% of the wealth or whatever it is, that have been looking at this whole unfolding with more resources, more time to plan, more intention. I think that we're all as individuals swept up in this bigger happening, this human happening. And I have no doubt that these tools are part of that unfolding. But I think it's also a matter of, if you're in the industry, then by all means, get in there, use the tools, create things that are new. But I think as individuals that are kind of on the sideline, it is a patience game. And it's not going to be an overnight wish-granting fairy that we're just going to overthrow the world's economics with blockchain and we're all going to be free from the current, constraints that we're in.
Yeah, the current overlords or whatever.
Well, yeah, I think that, this is something that we were talking about at lunch. I have, for various reasons throughout my last 10 years of life, more and more decoupled from this urgency that there's a huge problem that has to be fixed.
Yeah.
Because the company I started was trying to solve some of those financial problems, and you realize really quickly that your big, beautiful idea has to grow in a very crowded garden bed that already has really big interest growing alongside it. Mm-hmm. And it becomes sort of a game of, hey, where am I passionate? Where can I really put my energy into the world? But how can I also let go and be okay with things as they unfold, recognizing that there's a lot more complexity unfolding, but that in and of itself is beautiful, and it's humans and it's what they do.
Yeah.
And this is something that I shared earlier, but I often try and jump. It's just like looking at charts, right? When in doubt, zoom out. And if you're feeling individually really squeezed, or you're stressed, or you're worried about the future, when in doubt, zoom out. And I love looking at the human organism from that 30,000 foot level, where you look down and you just see, waterways with roads intersecting them and little communities forming and little farmland around that. And you see that even though at the individual level, it all feels desperate and complicated and personal, at the zoomed out level, like, we are an organism. We have come from the earth. The earth has this kind of momentum that just like flows from it. Mm-hmm. And that is where I find a lot of just peace, even in the chaos, even when things get personally very tense. Yeah, that's
cool. Yeah, I think the complexity definitely is something I've been thinking about a lot as well. And to your point, the momentum kind of flowing out of the earth, like, that's just emergence. You know what I mean? So an earth emerges humans, emerges people, it peoples, right? As a verb. So like that's what's happening. And for whatever reason, it's happening. And for whatever reason, we're aware of it happening, and we're talking about it happening, right? So it's like there's this weird sort of kind of happening unfolding. And so I guess the question, if we want to like zoom out, like you said, is like, well, what do you do with that? Like, what do you do about the happening? What do you do with it, right? Like, what do you do next, And so for me, that's a lot of, that's where I've been as let's see. So when I was 20, I zoomed out kind of against my will to a certain degree. Like I I read a document that sort of popped the bubble that I was in around Mormonism, and it kind of zoomed me out. And, then I, spent time playing in that new pond, right? Which was kind of just more, you're a rational actor, maximizing self-interest type of thing, and hedonism and stuff. And then, maybe some other experiences and some psychedelics and some float tanks and some, some things zoomed me out further. So now I'm in a place where I'm, having zoomed out enough to be like, holy fuck, this is just all happening. And like, yeah, it's not like, to me, it doesn't feel like any of it's for any particular reason. Do you know what I mean? Like that's why I mean by just a happening. Like, I don't think of it as serious. I don't think of it as, it's goal oriented or destination oriented, like where we got to get someplace. It just feels like it's a happening. And so, just like, I don't know, like there's something about what you're saying as far as like not attaching to the, like kind of decoupling, your needs to make your mark on the world or something like that, like fix all the problems or whatever it is. I feel like that's kind of a game of the ego in a sense, like trying to like leave some legacy or, I don't know, like failing to see that the true complexity of it. And really, when you go all the way down, like when you keep going down, it's like, do you even have free will to change something at all? Or are you really just a part of this thing that's happening? And if you trace back, each decision all the way back, like where does it actually go to? Where did the choice arise from? Where did it emerge from? And did you have any real fundamental choice when you did that thing or when you chose that thing? So it gets kind of messy where it's like, okay, so then what? Nothing's real, nothing matters. What do I what do I do next, right? And to me, what's kind of helped me find true north is an experience where I kind of experienced, I guess you might call it like non-dual awareness, where you're just kind of for I don't know how brief or how long it was, but just like seeing beyond or experiencing an awareness beyond just a separate self. And so, you might call that like, there's lots of different words for it, but like removing the illusion, I guess, seeing beyond the illusion and of the separate self, right? Which is really just one aspect of your being that's kind of evolved for various reasons, like survival and interoperating with other people. So it makes sense to have that like little self, but to then have an experience to go beyond that and see beyond that. I came back from that feeling like so much lighter, knowing that like it wasn't as big of a deal as I had thought. Like I made it to be so serious and so important, and I got to get someplace, I got to be somebody, got to do these things. But really, you're just like, you're playing a role, you're playing a game. So to me, it's more about like, what game do you want to play? And the more that you are sovereign, the more you have freedom to choose what game that is to the degree that you have free will.
Yeah. There's a lot there. What it makes me think about is that interestingly enough, we live in a time and a place where our culture seems to be really focused on the individual. A lot of the stories that we grow up hearing in movies and literature are different reflections of the hero's journey that puts like you as this central figure in your life that's so important. And it really puts this emphasis on individual excellence or, this kind of desperate importance that we all have to the overall thing. And I think that there's a beautiful reality to that notion that your birth was the birth of the universe from your perspective, and your death will be the end of the universe from this perspective. Like there is this individual lens that has a lot of value, and your life is in itself sort of this unfolding playing out of mythological images. And so you can really identify with that. But what we don't get a lot of in this culture, I think, is any bigger context where the individual, it's not about how popular you are on Instagram or the mark that you leave on the world or the being seen as being ahead above the other people around you. I feel like one of the things that is kind of sadly absent are those bigger contexts that we can then dissolve that self into. And I think that's where, individual sovereignty, that feels really important, right? Like your freedom to come out here and, go on a hike with me and have this conversation, like, leads to these moments in your life. But you are also part of this larger happening that is outside of your control. And that's where, if it's just about personal sovereignty, personal identity, hero's journey, those stories, when they collide with the bigger organism, then there's a real kind of, clash. Whereas if you're able to find a perspective also that, like you were kind of saying, I think, that oneness, as you were talking, I was thinking, one of the thoughts I've been having a lot lately as I get older and I see more people that remind me of other people I've met or people that have thoughts that I had at one point. It's like, what makes you so different from me? How is it that I was born me and you were born you and not my dog or a cat or a butterfly or, in this huge universe with who knows how many planets, who knows how many conscious entities. The only explanation that makes sense to me is that whatever it is that is me is you too.
Yeah.
Like we are one thing, just kind of looked at from different perspectives. Yeah. And so when I start to think that way, I realize that hero's journey, well, shit, the I that is truly me, deep down, is on all the journeys.
Yeah.
I am Elon Musk. I am my dog. I am the homeless person in the street. I am all of these things. And I don't know, those are the places that I like to go when I'm feeling really itchy about the individual. Am I succeeding or am I failing? What is my mark to leave on the world, and am I doing it or not? I think that there's probably brewing in some artists, some poet's notebook, the next planetary religion or the next, big idea that's really going to grip a big body of people and put us into resonance with this different way of looking at ourselves than how we have looked at ourselves.
You could argue that because of YouTube, Alan Watts and similar voices are already doing that. And that's why I think that, so we're both fans, of Watts, like, you're 100% right. There's something fundamental. I mean, and you can glimpse this truth. It seems to shine through in all different types of ways and domains. And that's kind of an indicator that there is something there, right? Like, when you can find it from different angles and perspectives and cultural lenses, right? So, you have this fundamental mystical truth coming through all the different religions in different ways. You have it coming from quantum physics, you know what I mean? And like, when you get down to the most fundamental stuff, it's like it kind of like disappears in front of you and into like some sort of goo that you can't it's like, it's supposed to be a particle. It's supposed to be a thing, right? Like, it's supposed to be this one thing I can measure, but really it starts to behave in ways where it's like the whole kind of, thing is linked to everything else. It's all interwoven, interconnected. It's this tapestry that's all oneness, which you might call Brahman or God or, the ultimate reality. And that thing fundamentally, by definition, would have no outside edge. So everything would fall inside of it. So anything, if we're going to use English and, like this subject-object sort of dichotomy that we are kind of trapped in, all of the things fall into the same bucket, called God. So it's like, and this ties back into sovereignty, I think, because fundamentally experiencing that. So I don't think you can just conceptualize it. So, I mean, I don't see anything wrong with conceptualizing it or talking about it or philosophizing about it, but to experience it is a different thing entirely. And, that's why I feel like, the mystery cults had their traditions and their psychedelic substance, their sacraments, and on all of these things happening from Eleusis and beyond until now. And there's always been a fundamental sort of, I mean, I don't know about always, but it seems like there's these disciplines and traditions and secrets that have been kind of propagated because there's a fundamental truth that could be glimpsed around the experience of, going beyond the self. So removing the ego from the equation for a minute, right? Dying before you die, right? Letting the concept of you, it turns into such a far off thing that it's no longer even on your radar, right? So like to have that experience, I think actually creates more sovereignty. So by losing yourself and then finding out that it came right back, right? Just like how when you exhale, your air comes back, is a level. It's like a trust fall. It's like it's like you become more sovereign, and when you glimpse the fundamental, I don't know, when you come back with a gnosis or a knowing that you aren't just this poor little me locked in my bag of skin here on probation. I'm actually, one of the threads in this cosmic tapestry, and so are you. So it's like I am no longer trapped in the kind of narrative that seeks to belittle me or push me down or put me in my place or put me in line. I'm more sovereign, but I'm also more interconnected than ever before, and seeing everyone else as every other being as the same. So I don't put myself up on a pedestal, and I don't say sovereign in the sense of like I am the empire, I'm the ruler or whatever. I'm saying it in the sense of, I'm aware of, like, trying to be more aware of like the way that the happening is, the way that this is, like what we are, what this is, trying to become aware of that. And I'm also trying to become more autonomous in the sense that I can govern myself, right? And then by doing those things, I gain more capacity. I gain more capacity. So all those three pillars kind of all play into sovereignty for me. And obviously there's no such thing as a self-made man. Like I'm not saying sovereign in the sense of like I'm an island, right? I'm saying it more like the more that each individual gets their own sovereignty upregulated, the more that collectively we benefit. So it's like, it's not a zero-sum game, right? It's like the more that you are sovereign, the better it is for me, right? So I think of it more as like it's not separate from the whole that you're talking about. And so if we were to find a way to create some sort of social operating system, new world religion or whatever you want to call it, right? Like some sort of way in which, be it through technology or like whatever it is, memes, we find a way to upregulate the sovereignty of individuals, then, that organically creates more authentic creation and creativity, because humans are creators. Like that's just what we are. So it's like if people are sovereign and they have the capacity to orient themselves and like to follow their curiosity or follow their bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say, then you get authentic creation and a renaissance, really. So it's like that's, to me, if you look at like the internet or the printing press, like those were giant steps forward in sovereignty. Like now I can access information outside of the bottleneck of the priest in my village, right? So now I have more sovereignty to think and choose. So like what's the next revolution that upregulates sovereignty? And I think for me, I mean, I don't know shit, but like for me, blockchain seems like it could do that with like DAOs and the ability for self-organizing coherence of collective intelligence, but also psychedelics, like another renaissance that's taking place right now, where it's like that experience of losing the small self and coming back, you really do feel like a fundamental shift. And that's why people call it one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives when they go through a trial at Johns Hopkins and take a big dose of psilocybin,
Yeah.
Sorry, just segued into psychedelics.
Totally. Yeah. Once again, there's a lot there. So a couple of the things that made me think of, having had some, similar experiences with, dissolving the ego and, floats and psychedelics. And like we were talking about earlier, I spent a lot of my 20s, in this relentless digging, going down rabbit holes, trying to answer a lot of these same questions. And I'm highly suspicious of any concept that only works in certain contexts. Because I think if we are in agreement that there's some bigger thing that we're a part of that is unfolding with these energies that we may never understand, but that we ourselves are a part of and an expression of, then those characteristics, those definitions have to exist everywhere. And if sovereignty is a thing, I'm highly suspicious of it when it has parameters that don't apply universally. So you talk about sovereignty and you're driving around in a van, kind of, making your own destiny. What happens if they take away your gas? What happens if we have a drought and there's no food for you?
Right.
This idea that you're actually separate from the happening, I think again, it just makes me suspicious to buy in too much to those types of definitions, because I think true sovereignty is something that applies everywhere. And the person who went to war and had their legs blown off and is now stuck in a wheelchair is just as sovereign as the person who's privileged enough to live off grid and grow their own food is just as sovereign as the person, So there's some, I think, core of the human experience that allows you to be free from the concepts that people are putting on you and saying, hey, no, you fit here. This is where you have to stay. You can't think laterally. And, when you're talking about the church being a purveyor of information, that's where, okay, yeah, there is a way to set yourself in a sovereign mindset where you don't need the church. You don't need, you're not dependent on any outside source for your own worth, your own value. And those are the things that just, as I said, kind of getting older and having, pursued a lot of these same things, those are the definitions that I'm the most interested in, because I've sat on the edge of a cliff and dissolved myself and been completely in the moment, right? But then you stand up and you go home, what's next? In those moments where you really get it, you see how all of it has to be exactly the way it is for you to have those moments. Yeah. And I think, this is the other thing I was thinking about when you're talking about sovereignty. I'm not against any of these concepts. And I really, I've been one of these people, pioneering technologies that help people use their resources more effectively. I believe in those human-centered values that drive innovation, drive people to create new things. However, I'm also, this is the other thought I had. Dang, it just slipped my mind. Give me a second. I went on that little tangent.
Yeah, relating to sovereignty. And you were talking about building technology to help upregulate sovereignty, and you believe in these concepts.
Yeah, I think I was talking down this line of having had one of those experiences and everything being right where it belongs. Okay, this is what I was thinking. If everyone believed the same things we believe, then it wouldn't be the same experience that you're having.
Right.
If everyone was out on that trail today, we were talking about the population of Fort Collins. What if everybody suddenly woke up to the sovereignty that you're talking about, your definition, and now they're all driving their vans down the same roads, they're hiking the same hills, they're broadcasting their thoughts. There is this arrangement that is actually, it's not good or bad, but it is supporting all of these individual experiences. And I think it's kind of, it's kind of missing that bigger zoomed out view to suppose that we should be doing something differently or that people should be more sovereign. They should, that just becomes a different form of thou shalt.
Sure.
And I see the whole world of, kind of the wellness industry and the self-help and the meditation and these things are wonderful. They provide for these great experiences. But we were talking about this earlier too. They become kind of a hamster wheel where, and this is riddled throughout the philosophies of the people who have had these experiences. You study Taoism or Zen Buddhism, and all the Zen masters, it's a game to them. It's about making a fool persist in their folly, right? It's about making people chase that rabbit until they realize that they, were holding the rabbit the whole time. And those are the types of things that as I get older, maybe it's just like an escapism. It's kind of unleashing the shackles of my own feeling of dire responsibility that I have to go out and make the world a better place. but it's, the person who understands the Tao in the morning can die in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's some deep honesty there.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make these conversations any less fun, but I think, if you're feeling like, shit, I'm not living right, I need to do yoga, or I need to start, focusing on my sovereignty, or I need to start, X, Y, or Z, in a strange way, those become the same types of impulses, the same patterns of behavior that keep you missing the moment.
Yeah, totally. That's a great riff. And I appreciate you pushing back on that, because it's making me really consider sovereignty deeply. I think this is, on a side note, quickly before I dive back into sovereignty, is like, this is exactly why I wanted to come and have these conversations, because I understand that, like, well, from what I've gathered, it seems like like what the Greeks kind of had right, and Socrates kind of pioneered, was this idea of like dialectic or dialogos. Like, if we come together and give each other space for exploration, and to entertain concepts or ideas, and to really try to get at the thing, giving each other space and patience for any noise in the system, right? And upregulating the signal and downregulating the noise, and doing that for each other, then this third thing can emerge separate from you and I, which is the logos, which is like really what I'm here for. So that's I love you pushing back, and don't stop doing that.
And yeah, it's not a pushback as much as it's like, I don't know, it's sort of that awareness that we are doing exactly what we're doing, and that's really wonderful.
Sure, yeah, which is yeah, that's a really cool idea. So first thing is I want to make it clear that when I'm saying sovereignty, I'm not talking about being separate from the whole. In fact, I think recognizing the inescapable connectedness that you have to everything is actually makes you more conscious, which in turn makes you more sovereign, in my opinion. But I'm not also not defining sovereignty as like freedom to travel or whatever, right? Like, I guess freedom to choose is part of it, right? So, and I think living in a democracy and valuing that as like a fundamental human right, like the freedom to choose, or to at least strive to, right? Like strive to make your situation better or whatever. But to me, like you can't control, like you said, the external circumstances. I can't control gas prices. I can't stop all the things that can throw things in the gears that stop me from being able to do what I want to do. External factors. As Stoicism would suggest, all I can do is like focus on what's in my purview of, I guess, control, right? To the degree that I have free will, right? So it's like I'm sovereign if I am content with that. You know what I mean? Content not having control over everything. I'm not saying sovereign means you're the emperor at the top with all of the buttons to push, right? You can make the argument that Vladimir Putin has very little sovereignty. You know what I mean? He's kind of like backed himself into a corner, right? So, and he's probably, it's like the emperor has his back to the wall, and the subjects kind of crawl towards him because he's the scaredest, he's the most terrified guy in the room. So like, I think of like Stoicism and, like Taoism and these philosophies as very liberating and actually upregulating sovereignty. So I'm not, I guess maybe sovereignty isn't the right word. I don't know, but I'm trying to find I guess point my compass in the direction of what's going to bring the best out of me so I can be of service. And if I can orient myself in that direction and open source that in some way that helps others also orient themselves if in some way, like anything that might be useful, then you've got more lit up humans. And so for me, like, rather than it being like we're an island separate from the whole, it's more like, no, we're radically connected to the whole. We are the whole on a fundamental level. And do you want the earth to be flourishing and thriving? And because I see us as Earth, right, on that level, if we zoom out and see the pale blue dot, that's us, right? So it's like, do we want to be in service to the flourishing of life, and be the stewards of that? And do we want to be in service to a more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, as Charles Eisenstein would say? Like, do you want, what game do you want to play, right? And so for me, it's like I look around at the current landscape, and there's just like a laundry list of like epidemics playing out right now, from like actual COVID and pandemic to obesity and suicide and on all of these other things that are just like, not flourishing, at least from what I can tell. And maybe I'm not saying that there shouldn't be everything. Like there's room for it all in the universe, right? So who am I to say like there shouldn't be obesity, right? I'm not saying that, because like you said, without the contrast, then you don't have that perspective, and that's the world that we're in. We're in this like dualism, with all of the things playing out simultaneously. So it's not necessarily that I feel like it's important to get somewhere or to be someone or to achieve something. It's more like I'm just doing my thing. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, if and the more that I have the freedom to do my thing, I have a hunch, and I could be wrong, but it feels like then the more that you have that sovereignty, I guess, if we want to use that word, the more that you can authentically take action, the more that you can come from a place of inspired action, right? So it's like what you've done with your sticking true to like, what feels authentic with your YouTube channel is a great example. Like, as soon as you start, creating all this content to make money or whatever versus what feels authentic, then you actually lose your sovereignty and you lose the ability to then go and create authentically. You kind of trap yourself, right? So by the more that you serve that, I guess, I don't know, like there's the metaphor of like, which wolf do you feed, right? Like you feed the wolf that leads you to more freedom, more sovereignty, and more of you, like more of like your authentic expression, because I have a hunch that each person is like this little seed, that this unique thing that the universe has emerged that has something really fucking rad to bring to creation. So it's like we're all part of this like creation orchestra, and we all have our own unique instrument, and no instrument's the same. And each person has a song has a thread to add to the song. And but if like you can't find your instrument, right? Or like you're trapped in some sort of like weird oppressive game where it's just sucking out your energy parasitically, whether it's through an algorithm, whether it's through like a corporation or whatever it is. Like there's all of these traps that we kind of find ourselves in. And so for me, I think step A, like part A, phase A, is like get out of the trap if you can. And then you can start to play. Like then you can start to create stuff, and then we can like, I guess, see what kind of co-creation comes out of that.
Yeah, and it's fun to hear you talk. I really enjoy hearing another person's just the symbols that you use to represent these different things that I think about too. And I'm in huge agreement as you talk about individuals as these seeds, blossoming. And I would add to that the real trick is seeing how everyone is that already. And you've had your experience. And I love True North. Like you're right. There's something in us that kind of knows like this deeper wisdom, whether we can put words to it or not, that feels, is this nourishing or is this actually, harmful? And so there's a way to align yourself with those guideposts that I think then serendipity starts lining up, and you have, this expression and this flow. So that's possible. I think that one of the concepts that I really like, that I really think is a instructive one, and it ties into this whole individual seed thing, is that in the mythology of the Buddha, he sat down under the Bodhi tree and said that he would not stand up again until he had achieved enlightenment for all sentient beings. All sentient beings. And he sat down and he had his enlightenment and he stood back up. Because in his enlightenment, in that experience, it included the enlightenment of all sentient beings. He didn't change them. They weren't doing anything different. They were exactly where they were. They were those seeds and they were perfect and beautiful.
Yeah.
So to me, that shows that in a human experience, you can have that deep, profound moment of just seeing how it all fits together. And when you get that, you kind of see how these opportunities are there. Anyone could be a Buddha. Anyone can be led to one of those experiences. But anyone who has been in that experience understands that everyone is exactly beautiful, special. They are the Buddha themselves and exactly what they're doing. And the reason that's important to me, and especially at this stage of life, is you get stuck to these images of yourself and the scale of enlightenment that you're on, or the level of achievement that you've had in the world, or the number of big experiences that you can trade over the coffee table of, well, I just did ayahuasca in the jungle. Well, I just and
it's like the spiritual one-upmanship.
Yeah. And we get kind of this, the reason why this is important to me is because, like I said, I'm most interested in these concepts and definitions that are true everywhere. In the Buddha state, and in the state where you just lost all your money in crypto and you feel like the biggest loser on the planet and your wife is leaving you and everything is going sideways. Like, that enlightenment must exist in both of those places. And when I anchor into those types of concepts, it actually takes the pressure off long enough to feel sovereign. Because until that kind of moment that, I am exactly who I am, exactly where I am, then you aren't sovereign because you're chasing something, or you're falling short of some expectation, or you're not on the path, or you're all of these metaphors and parallels that we have. And the whole world of self-help is like just ringing with these instructions and different opportunities to like do this, that, and the other. And those are all wonderful, but again, what's next? You have your enlightenment on the mountainside. What's next?
Yeah, and the self-help's typically like it's based on what you're not as well, right? Like, you need help because you're lacking something, right? And what you're saying is fundamentally different. It's saying like, no, actually you're already that. Like, you're already you're already there. You've already arrived. Like, you don't need to chase the enlightenment, because like that's the whole like kind of different techniques and traditions and practices to kind of get there. But like when you get there, it's like, oh fuck, like it's a laugh, because it's like, what was I trying to get to, And I'm really glad that you've kind of made me think this on this thread, because it's taking kind of two things that I kind of held slightly separately and making me realize that they're actually they're much more interwoven than I thought, which, I think that, fundamentally, like I was saying when we were hiking, like I don't think it's serious. Like I think when you glimpse that, that oneness or whatever you want to call it, like when you're in doubt, you zoom out, right? Like you're zoomed out, when you come back from that, it's much more like well, what subjective experience do I want to go for? Like, what do I want to play? Like, what you know what I mean? And that to me is jump-starting sovereignty, because now it's like it's not about getting someplace now. It's more like, okay, I'm fundamentally free to do or to experience life, like without the. So like, let me maybe just use a contrast, narrative to kind of paint my picture. But like, when you're like, let's say in the narrative that I grew up with, the ideology goes like, you're a special soul that was in heaven and was valiant in some previous existence, right? And so you had the opportunity to come down to earth and inhabit this body and be given the fullness of the gospel, like the good news, like God's plan for you, right? And, not everybody gets this opportunity. So you're special and you're here on this probationary period called a lifetime to prove that you're worth, I guess, and to follow the straight and narrow path to return back to your, heavenly Father or whatever. So that sort of narrative is completely goal oriented, right? And sacrifice based, right? Like you got to like do all these things properly and sacrifice, all of the lusts of the flesh and all the things that are trying to get you, off the path and sidetracked, so that you can return to, the rapturous place where everything is hunky dory, even though we don't really define that at all. Like it's just kind of this abstract idea of like eternity is going to be pretty good, right? Once you die. So to me, I think of it more like, this is all just happening, and the point is the happening itself. So it's like the point is to be here now, and it's just this moment. That's the point.
The opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So to even call it the point is missing the point, So I don't think of it as too serious. I do tend to take myself too seriously, though. And that's like the point of the game in some fundamental sense, is like you kind of get lost in the playing of it, right? And then things can get serious, and then you might have these little mile markers or milestones along the way that kind of like remind you,
And I think it's very true that when you hear someone speak passionately about something, some philosophy, people tend to say the things that they most need to hear. And even our mutual love, Alan Watts, like if you really peel back the story on his life, like he had some difficult times. He struggled with alcoholism. I think he had some trouble with his partner. Like he was able to exude these beautiful, thoughts, but he was also a human. He was also bumbling and stumbling. And I just think that that's also important to keep focus on, is that, I can sit here in this chair and I can pretend like I've got it all figured out, but really, this is my whole point. Like, there's no piece of knowledge that's going to make you stop being human and going to make you stop, having these emotions or having challenges or having pain or, the connectedness to your story. Like those things kind of come with the ride. And that is also in a way, deeply beautiful. Yeah. That it doesn't, I'm sure this is another concept that I really like that illustrates it, also from Buddhism. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So, sorry, I'm shivering. It's cold out here. We should turn the heat on. But so in Buddhism, there are these two kind of different concepts that play with each other. And one is the Pratyeka Buddha, and one is the Bodhisattva.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Yeah, so, and I see this a lot. Like, the Pratyeka Buddha is someone who attains enlightenment, but they do it for themselves, and they do it kind of in isolation. And I kind of think of that like the person who says, you know what, I'm above this mess. I'm going to take my millions and fly to my private island and sit on the beach and like have these beautiful moments, and like, great. Like, that's a private Buddha. You're having that experience. And it's wonderful that those people exist in the universe.
Yeah, there's a before you talk about this Bodhisattva, there's an element to that where it's like, I thought about that too. Like, even just retreating into your ecstasy of enlightenment or whatever, what if that on some sort of like vibrational level is actually beneficial in some way, just that guy exists? Do you know what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
Which is
it's like the
idea.
monks that, wake up every morning and meditate so that the rest of the world doesn't have to, like they're already purifying it. Like, and that gets back to that idea that like, you and I were the same thing, just doing different dances. Yeah. But like, I'm doing your dance, you're doing my dance. So yeah, but the interesting thing is that in Buddhism, Pratyeka Buddhas are kind of looked down on. They're actually kind of like, it's almost a bad look to be a totally private Buddha. And that what's more celebrated is the Bodhisattva. And the images of these people are like, the fat Buddha, everyone thinks it's Buddha. It's a Bodhisattva. It was just this like poor guy that used to go around with a bag collecting pieces of trash and giving it to children. And he was a Bodhisattva because he was just a human being. Like, he had his enlightenment in a way, but he was integrated. He was doing his part. He wasn't escaping. He wasn't running to the hills to have the enlightenment. Like, he was there living, dying, like feeling all the feelings. And that concept, I think, is, it's liberating.
Yeah, it is.
And it's cool too that in a lot of the kind of popularization of Buddhism, in a lot of the world, they practice this concept that like all you have to do is say this formula of, recitation, and like you are liberated. And that kind of plays into that same idea that like you don't have to be the ascetic monk who like attains enlightenment to have your bodhisattvaness. And again, these are the kind of concepts that just I'm more interested in at this stage in life, because it's not individual and questing and desperate, good, bad, success, failure. It's a deep acceptance and an appreciation. And earlier when I said, you have your enlightenment on the mountainside, what's next? Well, I think you come back and you be a bodhisattva. And for me, that's, spending time with my kids and knowing that I don't have to chase all the concepts down the rabbit hole all the time. And it's just like enjoying food with people and really putting my time and energy into relationships. And I mean, those are the things that I think pay out so much experience and joy and presence. And you can really lose sight of them. At least I have. I mean, this literally happened to me, I think, at a certain point where I got so stuck on my own story and my own enlightenment or whatever you want to call it, that you lose the connections with the people around you. And the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's always greener where you water it.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah. You can't lose sight of what's right in front of you, right? Like it takes nurturing, it takes water, and relationships especially, they atrophy. It's like muscles. If you don't use them, they just kind of atrophy, fall apart. So if, I guess if we were to, so to me, this is sort of like embodying this, being mode, quite a bit. Like we've been talking about ways of being, like, being sovereign or, being enlightened or, however you want to say it, like the orientation of like your fundamental beingness, like, but what's your, and don't mistake the word reason here for like, I know it's a slippery slope, so I'm not trying to say like, okay, so English is hard because it's like, I'm not trying to get at like, some goal-oriented thing, you know what I mean? And so, for example, okay, here's a better way of saying it. Instead of saying like, what is your reason for being or whatever, another way to say it would be like, what is your nature, right? Like, what is the seed growing into, right? Like if you water it, if the seed gets water and has fertile ground, what does it grow into? I see sovereignty as like the fertile ground. You got to have some nutrients to cultivate that growth. But what is it going to grow into? And to me, that's like ikigai. That's the thing that's like trying to emerge and out of each person, from your fundamental like core thing. So it's like if you, and I think you see, I'm not trying to change other people per se. It's just like this is the dance. This is me doing my dance, right? And so for my dance, I'm trying to, I guess, find out what it is, like how it is that I fundamentally, like what I'm here to do, and when I say that, like what I'm here to do, I'm not saying it like because like my fucking the guy in the sky watching me is expecting me to do it, so I better get to work. Do you know what I mean? I mean it more like no, it's just like something is, my heart's beating, right? Why? Like, why is it still? Because it's like I'm alive, and so I have this like life force energy in me for some reason that's animating me and causing me to do stuff, including drive to Colorado, right, and like meet you. So it's like for some reason, like that's just exciting. Sounds like a good idea. Sounds like why not? And while we're here in like the rock gym garage office space, like it does feel like kind of the right choice. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Like to me, how do you not get sucked into the self-help rabbit hole or the maximizing self-interest rabbit hole or whatever have you, like these different kind of pitfalls, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, and still take inspired action, like, you know, and not just be the Buddha that's just off in isolation, or the person who's, you know, off in despair or nihilism, you know?
Great question. I don't know that there's an answer to that, because I think it is, you know, you asked what's your nature, and I think that we all move out of one nature, but we're all, interestingly, these different mosaics of heart, mind, intention, etc. So the answer might be different for everyone, and I think that's one of the important things to kind of realize, is that one person's path doesn't have to be your path. And I mean, you're a great example. Like, you're here, you're doing this thing, and it's beautiful. And I hope nothing that I say discourages you from that path. I think it's also just recognizing that everyone is sort of blooming from that same sovereignty that you're talking about. And if you can't appreciate the whole garden, then you can't get to that point that I think you're really trying to get to, which is seeing yourself, seeing the world, seeing things in a context that is really, I don't know, fulfilling, or you can have that presence.
There's this idea that's popping in right now where it's like, so how do you like see the, you know, obviously the divinity and the sovereignty, the beauty in all the beings, right? But at the same time, have the discernment to say no. You know what I mean? To be like, no, don't put that plastic in that river.
Yeah.
You know, no, don't abuse those children via genital mutilation, and then, like, you know, like an education system that cuts them off from creativity and whatever. So it's like there's all of these things that I want to say no to, but at the same time acknowledging the greater whole and the fundamental choice and sovereignty of all the actors that are involved in this current system, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, just personally, I feel like the thing that gives me so much, I don't know, faith, I guess, is that we can see pretty clearly the breaking down of a lot of old systems that sustained our society for a certain period of time in a certain way. And as we see some of these systems starting to break down and fail, I feel like we're seeing an upswing in sort of individual enlightenment. And there are, I think, just if you looked at a graph of like how many people were taking psychedelics or listening to Alan Watts or going on adventures, like I think there's a big upswing right now. And I think that's the fertile soil that humans just naturally tap into when there's big changes, that provides the ideas and the solutions and the things. So you said emergent earlier. I think of it kind of as that emergent property. And it's not so much like, you know, sometimes we really frame things in terms of like choices, where I just choose to see it as a natural mechanism, or whatever you want to call it, by which people adapt to changes. Like I'm sure whenever there is a collapse in a certain system, there's a diving into this deeper awareness, this deeper kind of, you know, human-centered no station, you know, where we say, you know what? No, this isn't working. You know, we're at risk of running out of water or having our houses burned down because it's too dry or whatever. I think that that capacity in humans collectively really turns on when, you know, the pressure turns up. And so I'm not sure that it's necessarily anything that we need to do about it. I think it's happening, and I think you being here is a testament to that. And I think that there's a lot more people that are, like you said, kind of, you know, turning on, waking up through content like this and from other people as well. But it really feels like an emergent thing that we can, you know, participate in, but is kind of a cool, like, capacity that humans have and tap into.
Yeah, that's, I mean, probably why we're adapted to every niche on Earth. You know, it's like we have this strange ability with a new generation to really fit whatever the, you know, glove size is. And there's a book and there's a guy, I can't remember the name of it or his name, but the idea is similar. Like it's around the idea is something along the lines of like human beings, societies go through like different like cycles, right? And so you kind of have like, basically like the new beginnings phase, right? And then like that generation gets older and the next generation's got like sort of like the thriving sort of like booming phase, right? Like the golden generation or whatever, right? And then the next generation is kind of like they're starting to see the stagnation and the things start to crack. And then you have the chaos generation that sort of has to come in and come through like the
and then the
collapse.
new visionaries restart the cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So seems like that's probably, there's some truth to that for sure. There's another like saying, it's like strong men create good times create weak men, which create bad times, and then the bad times create good men again. So it's like you've got there's this weird relationship between our environmental conditions and who we are, which is pretty obvious. Like if you just want to test that, just start taking cold showers, and you'll like notice really quickly how your environment can immediately stimulate you, like change in yourself biologically and from a mental perspective as well, right? Like it's pretty crazy how interrelated we are to our environment. It goes back to what we were saying before. Like there's really it's more of an illusion to say that you're actually separate from that. It's like to pull the bee out of the forest and say like this bee is just a separate thing. It's like, no, it only exists because of this greater whole. They evolve together, and it's like this. They really describe each other.
Yeah, let me lay this one on you. This came out of my most recent little solo road trip. I was trying to record a video, and I may end up posting it. I don't know. But I was noodling on this idea of let's just pretend that in one tree in the forest, all of those cells that make up the tree were suddenly self-aware. What would that experience be like? And I think that, in the tree itself, they would probably, they would start to recognize differences. The tree cells that are up in the leaves that are maybe, swaying in the wind might look all free compared to the ones that are in the trunk holding up all this weight, might, feel different from the ones that are, there's all these different tasks to do for individual cells to be a tree. And if, one of those cells had this epiphany and kind of realize the treeness, what would be the message that it would bring back to all those cells? As the leaf cells are dropping in the fall and dying, and the ones that, I feel like in a real, like tangible sense, it's the same question for humans. And that we are, in a sense, an organism like a tree, and we're all having individual experiences. We're all holding up different pieces of the structure. And we're all moving towards an eventual death. But, the tree is also presumably looking out and seeing, the tree next to it and seeing the forest go through that kind of a cycle. And there's some set of concepts that I think can be gleaned from those tree cells that can be applied to yourself, and just seeing how like you are this individual piece of a larger whole that is going through these cycles, that, it's beautiful. A tree is beautiful. It's a miracle. It is amazing, right? And to have a forest is even more amazing. And yeah, what is the story that you can tell yourself that puts you into that kind of a harmony with the human happening?
Yeah.
And then you were saying this on the hike, the thing that's so crazy about life is that it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper inward and outward. So not only are you, this individual cell of an organism, but you yourself are made up of trillions of cells and trillions of bacteria. And like, there's really no way to tease apart what this you is that we've even been talking about for the last hour.
Yeah.
And that those types of thought pursuits are the ones that kind of land me back in this place of just being really fucking grateful
Yeah.
that I am even capable of feeling these emotions, you know, pain, sorrow, happiness, that I have the people around me that I have, that, you know, every breath is deeply a gift. And fuck, you know?
Yeah, that's the most real thing right there. Because it's there's two things there I wanted that sparked up when you were talking. One of them is the thing about death, because that right there is the finality of it is, I think, one of the reasons why it feels so vivid, so real, you know, to be human, to be alive, right? So like you've got an end point, which seems so abstract. It seems so abstract to people, because until it's not, you know, until you have like a near-death experience, or, you know, you get a diagnosis or a close call, or somebody you know dies, or whatever it is, and then you're like, whoa, yeah, this is actually coming to an end for everybody, and everybody that's ever lived, it's always come to an end. And, you know, that to me is another thing to be grateful for, because it's what's giving this, it's what's punctuating. It's like the period at the end of the sentence, right? It's like it gives the words meaning. If the words ran on forever, they would have no meaning. So, you know, you need that like hard stop, right? To make a life have that subjective realness to it that life, well, at least for me, seems to have, right? But the other thing is like on a less esoteric note, because we're talking about, you know, like seeing the you know, like the bigger picture, and how do you, like, what story do you tell yourself to interoperate with, you know, humans, as like, you know, like use the metaphor of the cell of the tree and whatnot, and like seeing you as a cell in this greater body, right? Because you could define it on different levels, right? Like I could define, you know, you by the pattern of like that the DNA has emerged called Ryan, that's like able to talk in a mic, or I could define you by like you go into the individual cells and start naming those, or, you know, we could zoom out and we could define you based on your community, your environment. We could define you based on like planetary scale and like, you know, the species, right? And we could say Homo sapiens is one thing, right? So we could identify on that level of a planetary species, or even just a planetary planet, just like total, right? So, and I think that since the 60s, when we went to space and we turned around and we took a picture of the Earth, and since LSD right around the same time, and all of these various phenomena that are like giving rise to more and more global consciousness, the internet being the huge one, and the connection of you know, human life to other human life on Earth, and this information age and everything else. It's I guess the question on a less kind of esoteric level is like, so where do we go from here? You know what I mean? Like, and when I say we, I'm talking about our species, right? So from the level of like, you know, we're one thing. We are now, and we're terraforming the planet. You know, like one person's decisions, namely Vladimir Putin, could have consequences for the entire planet, right? So, like those, we're at a place where we're so globally interconnected now that our fate's kind of tied together in some sort of fundamental way that I don't think has ever been the case in any previous civilization before. So all civilizations have collapsed, right? But their collapse didn't cause the collapse of the rest of the civilizations on Earth at the time. But now we're a global civilization where we could very well see, you know, the breakdown and collapse of like you know, on a level and a scale that has never happened before that we know of. I mean, probably has happened in the past, who knows? But the point I'm getting at, I guess, is like, do we be the so to bring it back to Buddhism, are you the guy that's like, okay, I kind of see the problem, but I also see how beautiful and perfect reality is. So I'm just gonna, enjoy my walks in whatever forest is left, and I'm going to enjoy the dinners with whatever, good food I can find and clean water I can get while I can, right? And I'm going to like enjoy each moment as much as possible but I understand like the perfectness of this whole kind of like firework that's exploding and it's all going to go away. Or, do you like try to create the more beautiful world that is possible in the sense that like the game that comes next, right? Like how do you what does the world look like in 2050 and beyond? Like how do you think about that? Like what game are you trying to play going forward? And like you have kids, so it's like how do you how are they going to be oriented in the world? You know what I mean? Like that's something that I'm thinking about a lot lately because I'm almost 30. So it's like, am I going to have kids? It's something I think about quite a bit. And I'm trying to, it's not like I can create like a perfect world for them, obviously. Other than obviously the world's perfect, but I'm saying like, I can't create like a perfect like bubble of like no problems. And even if I could, I wouldn't want to, because that's what life is, right? It's what it's about. So, but like what I'm getting at, I guess, is how before I pull the trigger, it's just like, I want to feel some level of optimism or encouragement that I can give them a life that I'm like proud of, you know what I mean? Or at least like stoked about, like, and maybe that's naive and maybe it's selfish. Maybe it's just like, dude, no matter, like, they're going to blow your mind no matter what kind of situation you think you've got going on, right? Like it's going to be challenging no matter what, and it's going to be incredibly rewarding no matter what or whatever. I think of like the idea of like passing off, just like a burning dumpster fire to the next generation as just like something I really don't want to do, And so like, I'm trying to like kind of balance these two truths of like, like there's this beauty underlying, reality, which I can totally get behind you and get on board with the idea of like, taking the walk in the forest and just enjoying it and playing with the kids and just enjoying it like that. I can totally be in the moment and get there. But on the other hand, like there's this side of me that wants to zoom out and be like, but what about all this other stuff? And it's not just going to go away just because you're turning off the news or whatever. You know what I mean? Not to say you should be watching the news, but you see my point, right?
Yeah. Well, you asked a lot of questions there in one, and I think the answer is yes and. And I, speaking as someone who does have kids, I mean, we all were born into a dumpster fire. And I mean, show me a point in human civilization where there weren't wolves out there, and where there wasn't personal danger, and there wasn't the threat of food scarcity or a rival band, raiding.
Right.
I think it's a fallacy to think that the world needs to be a certain way to pass it to the next generation. I think that if it is in your nature to procreate, then that is just a beautiful expression of who you are, but it's not for any reason.
I see.
It's not because the future is or needs to improve necessarily. I can tell you that a lot of just my change in tone and perspective comes from having kids. And just, when you're spending time with a little human who doesn't have definitions or labels yet, and you see that human spirit that just over and over, I'm going to get a little choked up. Like, the thing that a human is so undefinable. You can't put a container around it. It'll take the shape of whatever container it's in, and it'll overflow it anyway. And that cycle of people just, living, trying their best, having kids, dying, those people living, I mean, that's what humans do. And so, I don't know, I have quite a few friends who I've talked to about this that are like, we're really into our own story, and we're just really scared to have kids because the world is, such a messed up place, and we're worried about this, that, and the other.
Right.
And I don't know, it's beautiful to see beautiful people have beautiful children.
Yeah. I totally see what you're saying, man. It's like, I just feel like I'm kind of speaking for almost like a generation. Do you know what I mean? Like I see so many fucking, like I'm driving around, with Lily and our dog, and I'm just coming across couple and their dog and singles and their dog and just like all these.
And man, in the old days, people had to have 10 kids because a third of them would die. It doesn't make the one that died any less special than the one that lived. It's how humans have continued to be humans.
No, but it does speak though to the time and to the environmental moment, right? Where the fact that like this younger, we'll call it millennials and below generation is like they're not chomping at the bit to have kids. And I think there's a couple.
Maybe that's but again, a lot of these things we can look at and we can say, oh, this is choice. This is a really personal thing. And there's another way to look at it that, gosh, we're about to, experience, I think, a lot of new challenges. And those feelings, those impulses to like have a lot of kids or not, I think is also just this organism kind of taking shape to fit this new environment that we're moving into.
Yeah,
so
that's totally what I was trying to get at is like the environment is actually what's kind of the environmental moment is what's kind of informing the generational kind of the flavor of each generation, right? So, for example, my dad's environmental moment was him coming into the world in a small insular society without the internet and with only one worldview and ideology. And one of the primary foundational axioms is multiply and replenish the earth, motherfucker. Like, no birth control and have as many as possible and marry as many women as possible as well. So like you have a bunch, right?
Grow the cult.
Yeah. And honestly, like, but in a way that's like, love the children as well, and like it's like there's some baked in values there too. It's not like it's insidious necessarily. It was just kind of his environmental moment, right? And so it makes sense to me why he played out that role, right? And had 24 kids. So it made a lot of sense.
And good for you that he did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because if he'd have stopped at 17, then I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's like 17 other ones got in front of me in line, and I still made it. The odds of me making it with any other guy are really low. It's funny. But I don't know. I think that this environmental moment, my generation, is looking around at the current landscape, and they're not jumping at the bit to have kids. And, it's for various reasons. It's not just for climate change and, the uncertainty of the future and et cetera. It's also education and, individual freedoms, right? And the ability to like you said, you have friends that are kind of like, they're doing their thing. Like they're enjoying their story right now without what it takes to, I mean, if you have a child, then all of a sudden you're shifting gears. So not to say that I wouldn't love to shift gears, but it's like, I don't necessarily want to shift gears in this moment, right? Because I'm not going to raise a family out of my van, right? So it's like, that's something that I'd have to like, shift gears. So I don't know. I just think that there's this whole sort of, I don't think I'm alone in saying that like, I'm on the fence right now. And a lot of people are on the fence right now, I think, because of, like people can barely even afford housing, like young people. So it's kind of a strange thing. It's like all the young people I talk to, their goals aren't super mega long-term oriented, that as far as I can, gather.
Do you think that's a problem? Or, I mean, you say it in a way that kind of leads to like.
I think that if I'm just painting on a blank canvas and I'm trying to describe, a better situation, I guess, or a more beautiful world, trying to imagine one. And, this is just an imagination space. So don't, you feel free to tear it down. But like, I'm thinking like having intergenerational plans in the sense of like, thinking beyond not just your paycheck and not just, this year, but thinking, or this election cycle, but thinking, intergenerationally, and like, what are we as a species, what are we oriented towards, and what is the earth becoming, right? As a byproduct of our collective intelligence, because that's what it is, whether it's conscious or not. If it's unconscious, I mean, it seems like it's mostly unconscious, but like we have this sort of collective intelligence, which means we have collective cognition, we have this collective choice making sort of, and capacity to do stuff. So what are we doing with that capacity? And when you have, more like sovereignty, I guess, is like you have the ability to, you have the luxury really of like getting all philosophical and like, what world do we want to create? But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, obviously you're in that moment, right? So I'm not saying it's like on anyone who's in that moment. That's just like the moment that they're in. I'm wondering, like, as a collective, do we want to, and how would we do this? How would we, another way of saying this is like, we have everything we fucking need right at our fingertips. We have the abundance of the earth. We have the bottomless well of human ingenuity, right? And creative process and the capacity. All we're really lacking is putting the thing together, which is like come to coherence, right? And instead we've got our nukes pointed at each other, and we're fighting over resources, and we're drawing all these invisible lines on the map and saying like, this is mine, and that's, So it's like we have there's something about like the software that we're running, because we're all in these like biological machines, right? With this supercomputer for a brain, and the software that we're running is causing this sort of like, seeing the other as other, and this difference, and this, this divide, right? And I guess like the utopianist kind of like idealist or whatever in me is kind of trying to imagine a state or a place in which there's actually some sort of collective coherence. And I don't think of that as like some sort of like global, like top-down hierarchical utopia. I think of it more of like what you would see in nature, which is like little colonies, little cells, little beehives of kind of self-sustaining sort of, I don't know, tribes, I guess, interconnected in some way that I don't know how to fully articulate, because it's kind of like sci-fi. But I'm just wondering like what we're growing into. It's just an interesting thing to think about. And COVID is really where I think you could say is another catalyst for that metamorphosis. It started like changing global society on like, or society on a global level. So it's like, I'm trying to kind of explore this space to see if there's some signal worth orienting towards and broadcasting toward to others. Because if there's anything that is cool about the moment that we're in right now, other than just like the subjective, emotional sort of like the mystery of it, right, is that we got this, It's like we got these like toys and this technology, and we're globally connected. So we do have this like window where it's like we might actually be able to pull something off that has previously not been possible, right? I don't know. It could just be fantastical thinking.
I think it's happening. And I think that it's not as dissimilar from what has happened in the past as we might think. Mm-hmm. I was at a bookshop a couple days ago, and there was this really cool collection of photographs of protest signs. It was like a history of protest with signs and political cartoons and these things going all the way back to the Revolutionary War.
Oh, really?
And it was amazing to see the similarities in people's perspectives and the challenges that were faced and the outrage over certain things. Mm-hmm. And I don't see this moment as that much different from what we've done in the past. And we have these microphones so we can reach that bigger audience because there's more people. But in the old days, they would gather in churches and the whole town would hear a sermon. So there's always been that ability to reach out and share ideas. And like I said, I think I think we need to give ourselves some faith and credit that we're doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little bit because I think that, I mean, on the one hand, yes, we're doing it. But like on the other hand, a village in Europe in the 15th century, they're all getting their, most of the information is coming from, like you said, church, right? And it's coming from the book of truth that has the answers. And so the whole paradigm is like...
And when that didn't work, then Luther split off and started his own little thing. And then when that didn't work, people split off and started another little thing. And you get all these little permutations and...
Yeah, but to get to the point where we have, individual content creators or whatever, and you have like the distribution to be able to talk to an audience, like someone like Joe Rogan can reach millions of people, that's a unique moment. That's a totally unique moment. No human being, no individual has ever had the microphone that Joe Rogan has. In the history of our planet, nobody's ever had that kind of distribution as an individual. So to me, that right there is one aspect of how it's unique.
So, but I'll ask you this question. I was going to say this earlier when you're talking about Putin, I could ask the question, is Putin shaping the world or did the world shape Putin?
Yeah.
Is Joe Rogan shaping the world or did the world present Joe Rogan and form him? And
I think it's the latter in both cases. I mean, I tend to think that like we're really more just like emergent properties of the complex environment, right? Like, I don't think there's such thing as a self-made man, So I'm not saying that like it's because of Joe Rogan that this is the case. He just happens to be the guy in the seat with the mic. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm getting at is like this moment is unique. To me, it seems it's different. I don't think it's the same. It's more like a Cambrian explosion.
And I didn't say that this is the same moment as the Revolutionary War, but the content and character of the human spirit, I think, is more consistent than we might think.
For sure.
And this moment might feel like we're at the precipice of civilization, and it's so important that we get it right because the whole thing could crash. And that's how everyone has felt forever. And we're still here. We're the children of children of children.
That's true, but our ancestors didn't have nukes. So I'm just saying like it's not quite the same. In fact, you could argue that it's actually different on many levels. Never before have we been able to completely, like, so for example, the ocean used to be seen as limitless abundant resource, and now we're finding out how limited it really is, right? And we're reaching the boundaries of our environment. Like, Earth is a finite space. So we're coming into that consciousness where we've got 4K footage of Earth from space streaming right now all the time, So it's like that's the difference to me is we're the most global that we know we've ever been, and we have the ability to pull the next black box technology out, the next thing out of the hat that might be the end of it, right? Like whether it's from nukes or CRISPR or whatever it is. Like I'm just saying, like, we have the ability now to change life on Earth in a way that we just haven't had before. So another way to articulate this, I'm doing a bad job of it.
No, I think you're making a really good...
Well, there's this guy, Daniel Schmachtenberger. Are you familiar with him? Someone I'm going to try and meet. He puts it into really, really eloquent terms, but it's basically like something along the lines of like to have the Paleolithic brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, right? Mm-hmm. So to have the technology and the power of gods, but not the wisdom of gods, eventually would self-terminate. Like eventually that's a disaster waiting to happen. So it's like the down to like the more temporal, real level of like just being a human on Earth, right? Are we going to figure out how to, get through this beyond this moment? Whatever that means, however long that is, like, are we going to be able to continue this metamorphosis into something like a butterfly? Because I love using this metaphor. I don't know if you saw the butterfly iconography and the stuff that I've used with True North Float, but this idea of like metamorphosis and this caterpillar being on one level, if you were to just zoom in and only see the caterpillar, you'd be like, this motherfucker's just destroying everything. He's just eating everything, right? Mindless consumption of his environment. But then he evolves and transforms into, goes through a metamorphosis, which means like new cells consume the caterpillar cells. It's like some sort of soup for its growth. And this thing that emerges is fundamentally required for that ecosystem to work. So it's like you have something that on one level looks like detrimental to its environment, and on another level is completely essential for the environment to function. So humans look kind of similar. Like we're just sort of like we've used this like massive well of Earth's resource that we've just kind of been extracting for our growth. And now we're hitting this size where we're like, maybe that's big enough, like, like we're kind of exhausting some things, right? And we've got like several billion of us. So, maybe the next, maybe with that energy and with the things that have come out of that, like us becoming more self-aware, this sort of like the Renaissance and this Enlightenment wave and psychedelic Renaissance and technological, explosion and all these things that are contributing, these factors that are, contributing to this moment, maybe that is going to give rise to some sort of emergence. And I guess like I said, the idealist is asking, what is the butterfly form of humanity on the collective level? And for me, you could ask that on the individual level as well. Like we all have a locust and a cat or a grasshopper in us, right? So another example would be there's this grasshopper that when rains, I think it's indigenous to Africa, but there's this grasshopper where like when the rains are plentiful and you get a lot of overgrowth of grass, the grasshopper population explodes, and then the rains kind of go away and then the grass recedes and then you get denser populations of grasshoppers, and then eventually it's basically like urban grasshopper city land, right? And the grasshoppers go through a metamorphosis where they transform into a locust that's got like different physiology, bigger thorax, and just like more aggressive behavior, and then the locusts will swarm and become these like kind of terrorists. So to me, like on an individual and a collective level, like we can probably manifest in multiple ways. Like we're mosaics, like you said. So it's like, what's the kind of the higher angels of our nature, versus versus kind of what's going on right now.
Hey, I mean, that's a beautiful parallel, and I have struggled to find a definition for humans that puts us outside of nature.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we pour concrete. It's made out of lime and, aggregate and water. And we think that that's something unique to humans.
Because we put a right angle to it.
Because we put a right angle to it. But, yeah, I mean, on one level, I feel that you started off talking about playfulness and that levity, like it's music, it's play. And then we had this really serious talk about, man, it all might be going down and we're all going to die. And, and not to call you out on that, but I think
no, it's important.
It's yes. And right. So, I mean, let's say that humans nuke themselves. So what?
No,
this
I
is
agree.
A little, backwoods rock on a fairly insignificant star orbiting,
sure.
in a galaxy of trillions of galaxies. It's like, get over yourself, planet Earth. No.
I agree with you.
And I'm just. I mean, I think that's kind of the fun of the individual perspective, and it's not bad. It's just it's really interesting to be playing at both levels, and maybe that's where humans are, unique on this planet. Is that we are going with the flow. We are transforming. We're becoming locusts. We're becoming all of these different things. I mean, if someone wasn't in Joe Rogan's seat, there'd probably be someone else in Joe Rogan's seat. Like the world is kind of cultivating and just, flowing from this thing that it's doing, and it's natural. And I think that the trick is to both exist with that individual hunger and drive and desire and like being one of those cells that is actually lifting rocks and shaping and moving, and it all feels desperately important. And then having those moments where you do just it's music and it's play and it's wonderful, And when the music stops, like it's going to stop for every one of us, for the planet. Like it doesn't matter how far we push the rock, eventually the sun's going to burn out. Well, guess what? That's a 3rd generation star. It's burned out twice before. You know, that is for me that, like, I don't know, it's that still point in all the chaos and craziness where you get to just sort of, get back to that music and see that the earth is just this, chord being plucked. And one of the books that I really recommend, it's something that I came across when I was a bit younger. It was written in the 60s and 70s, so some of the science is a little dated, but the spirit with which the book is written is so beautiful. But it's Guy Murchie's The 7 Mysteries of Life. It's a tome. It's like super thick. This guy spent 30 years writing this book and illustrating it. And one of the things that he talks about in there is the germination of worlds. And this idea that, a planet is in a way a seed. And it just absorbs all of this energy from the local, giant radioactive ball of fire in the sky. And then when it's ready, these patterns just unfurl. And it's probably something that only happens once per planet, And we look up at Mars and we see all these, signs of water and like a past, potential flowering. And so I think you're right. What you said earlier, we're always at a unique point in that unfolding, but everything in nature is a cycle. And if we're destined to blow ourselves off the face of the planet, I mean, what are you going to do about it? You know, I mean, how is being worried about it the same as being prepared for it?
Oh yeah, they're not. So I'm gonna enjoy like the things that I enjoy, in life, and I'm gonna try to be in that moment, and find the center, like you said,
Your true north.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, the playfulness is like so. Don't confuse like my seriousness for a lack of playfulness, because it's like I think that it's not serious, but you're playing a game, but to get lost in the role, to get lost in the play is sort of the fun of it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, I get jazzed, I get way into it, and I want to like, I get all hyped up, and I kind of like start to channel in these like kind of wacky ideas about like what the world could be like, and it's not to say that like I must shape the world. It's just like, it's like, why not? Like we're here to throw fucking paint on a canvas.
You are shaping the world.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm creating it by seeing it, and by experiencing it through my subjectivity. So it's it's been a fascinating convo, man. and I don't want to, I could keep going, but because this has been really fun, but we could probably wrap it. And this is as good a time as any, because I think, but so besides the 7 mysteries, what else has helped you find your true north, or that center, or whatever else? Like if you want to share anything that might be useful for someone else.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's so much good stuff out there. Like there's so many just amazing books. Like I was saying, when I was younger, I really felt like, I'm going to find the book that has the answer. And then it's really just, I found all these different reflections of different perspectives. And some of the more meaningful ones to me, Alan Watts definitely is, like we were saying earlier, like I think his words and his life are different. And that's kind of important to keep in mind, that a lot of times the people that are sharing this wisdom aren't necessarily, separate from the game. Like they haven't won it. They haven't overcome it. Like there's no guru, I think, that has like completely stepped outside the human role. And I think that's important if you're young and you're questing and you're trying to find like, what is this, piece of information that's going to liberate me from how I feel right now. And it actually took, reading some Taoism and, just comparative mythology to kind of get to that point where it's like, okay, there isn't one piece of information, one perspective that's going to unlock all of this. But that being said, I do really enjoy looking at how other cultures have approached this same big question. I'm not any one thing. I joke that I'm an interest. So if I like have to say what I am, I'm not Christian, I'm not, atheist. Like I'm an interest. I'm interested in all of these things. I see how they all intersect and overlap. And some of the philosophies that have spoken deeply to me are Taoism. I love the Tao Te Ching. There's one translation in particular that I really like. And the opening passage of that is that the Tao called the Tao is not the Tao.
Yeah.
And names can name no lasting name.
Exactly.
So right there, you get this smack in the face that like we're trying to, push around concepts with other concepts to get to what's behind all these concepts. Like it's never going to work.
Not with the words.
Not with the words. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great book. I took that book with me on my backpacking travels around South America and Asia and stuff, and just kind of it's one of those things you can pick it up and just get something real.
Yeah.
Just from any page.
And I think sometimes like the most deep writing is more like poetry or something that invites you to kind of go past it and kind of lose layers rather than gain more concepts. But I mean, really, if I have, something to share or something to say, and I'm speaking to myself, like, I'm going to get off this podcast and I'm going to stop being all enlightened podcast guest. And I'm going to go back to my own struggles and figuring out money and figuring out relationships. Like, I do not have it figured out. But what I do know, what I think I know from my life of experiences is that in some strange, bizarre way, all of this is okay. And it's deep and it's beautiful and it's the fulfillment of every promise you could ever be promised, just how it is. And that you, just as you are exactly what you were always going to be. And that to me is, it's a thumb to suck. It's sort of like a blanket to hold when things get really scary. But I think it's rooted in some of these experiences and just moments where, if you have one moment of joy in your life, it required every moment of suffering that came before it. And we would not be sitting here right now if it weren't for horrible wars and genocides and personal tragedies and all the rest. It's the compost heap that's at the base of the forest. That's all the dead trees that grew before.
Yeah.
And there's some way of seeing life that kind of lets you just step off that wheel and take a breath and then get back on the wheel.
Yeah, and say aho and thank you to all the all the ancestors and all the things that have the decomposers and all the things that have come before to give rise to this
Let's pour a beer for uncountable homies.
Uncountable homies. Yeah, that's perfect. Fuck, man, this has been great. So Uncomplication for anybody who wants to check out your future,
my moving train wreck,
your future ramblings, and
exactly.
Cool, on YouTube, right? Or do you have like a website? What's the best place to...
uncomplication.com. I mean, I haven't really updated that in a while, but it has a lot of my older, rantings and perspectives from 10 years as an entrepreneur. And yeah.
Sick.
I think that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, we'll see what's actually on there by the time I get my act together and release this. If there's still an internet.
Can I end by sharing a poem with you?
Oh, yeah, I'd love that.
Okay. It's not super long, but two rivers converged, their contents combined, giving birth to a swirl of life. From chaos came order, from void arose form, a new being danced into the light. It started so small it could barely be seen, surroundings and self intertwined. But the pattern grew larger, and a whirlpool formed, and with that was its selfhood defined. As the water flowed through, it twisted in bliss. Its soul was the cool summer rain. But its vigor diminished as autumn approached, and the cyclone's source water soon waned. Then the whirlpool said, "What's it like to be dead?" But the water which asked this had gone. As new water flowed in, it asked yet again, but it realized the question was wrong. If I'm always changing, my life but a flow, how can there be hope that I last? When the self that I was, while pondering death, in this moment already has passed. As its channel dried up, it felt itself fade, going back into that which it came. Without fear, without sadness, as it was born again, resurrected with each spring's new rain.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Not going to try to top that. Thank you.